Thanks for joining us. My name is Dan Bamba. Preferred pronouns are he, him, his. I'm wearing a white shirt. I am the Marketing and Community Engagement Manager here at Flushing Town Hall. Thank you for joining us for our first Artist Professional Development Conversation. This is a program that we're bringing on for the first time in a long time. So we're excited to be able to bring this conversation to you guys. So thanks for taking the time to join us. Just a few notes about the session where it's gonna be a conversation between myself and Ellen, and then followed by a Q&A. At the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to access the chat and the Q&A. Please feel free to put any comments or any notes that you have in the chat. Just make sure you're sending it to all panelists and attendees, not just all panelists. And then the other thing is there is another separate button for Q&A. So that's where we're gonna handle all the questions. So if I can ask you, send all your questions through the Q&A and all your comments through the chat, because that'll allow us to have all the questions organized. We'll follow this section in the next day with slides and a survey that we'd like you to fill out to let us know what you thought about this program and how any improvements that we can make, other topics that you'll want us to cover. And then we'll also be sharing the slides as well as answering any questions that we don't get to. We'll include them in the notes from the session as well. And on top of that, the session is being recorded and will be available at a later date on YouTube. And throughout the session, we'll be describing each slide's title and images for you. We'll get started. If you guys have any questions, send it in the Q&A. And please, if you just tuned in, please introduce yourselves to all the panelists and attendees. So for our first session, it is Ask a Presenter. This session, it's geared for self-represented artists, and it's gonna go over general topics and best practices on reaching out to venues, both for visual arts and performing arts, how to reach out to venues to get your work booked and shown at those spaces. So it's with great pleasure, I'd like to introduce Ellen Kodadek, the Executive and Artistic Director here at Flushing Town Hall. Ellen, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you everybody for being here with us tonight. As Dan mentioned, I'm Ellen Kodadek, and I'm the Executive and Artistic Director of Flushing Town Hall. So I wear two hats there. I'm an older Caucasian woman with now shoulder-length hair, gray and brown, more gray than it was a few months ago, and I'm wearing a blue and white patterned shirt. A little bit about my background. I've been in Flushing Town Hall for 12 years now, and I have a career in visual and performing arts that spans over 40 years. And I worked for a very long time at the Snug Harbor Cultural Center in Staten Island for consulting projects with Lincoln Center in upstate New York, and then had a 7-year stint in Binghamton working on the merger of two nonprofits, and then moved back to New York City to manage and lead Flushing Town Hall. That's a little bit about me. From time to time, I may be looking down or off to the side, so I'll be either taking notes or referring to my notes. So if you see my head bobbing around, that's what that's all about. Thank you.
Great. So first we'll get started with talking about Flushing Town Hall as an organization and as a space. This is a view of Flushing Town Hall. It's an older building. It was built in 1862, initially to welcome Northern soldiers back from fighting in the Civil War. And then in the 1990s and 2000s, it was later repurposed to be a multidisciplinary art space. Flushing Town Hall is a Smithsonian affiliate, as well as a CIG for the city of New York. We're located on Northern Boulevard in Flushing, but we serve the greater New York City metropolitan area. Currently, unfortunately, the building is closed, but we do have online programming. So you can visit our website for upcoming programs. That address is flushingtownhall.org/all-virtual-events. or you can just go to flushingtownhall.org and we'll have all our other programs for you. Flushing Town Hall, as a multidisciplinary art space, we have multiple presentation spaces. The first is our theater. So this is about Flushing Town Hall, our theater. On the left is a view of our theater empty, built with all their seats installed. Their full seated capacity is 308 max occupancy. On the right, you'll see the theater much different. It is filled with people during one of our global mashup concert events. And as you can, in the picture, people are seated, but in the front towards the stage, there are also people dancing on an open dance floor. That's all to show that though we do have a 308 seated theater, there are different arrangements such as an open dance floor, audience in the round. We have been also doing galas in the theater as well. That's all to show that our space is customizable. That also goes towards our gallery, which is the next slide. The next slide shows a bird's eye view of the schematic of the gallery space. It's an L-shaped gallery. And at the top right, you will see the space with artworks installed in them. And then at the bottom right, you will see people seated in our gallery space for a talk as well. On the space itself is about 1,500 square feet. It has dimensions of 41 by 52 feet. It has a total capacity of 125 people with 70 people seated. As you can see, it's not just a gallery. We also hold performances and rentals in our gallery as well. And typically in our space, it's typically only group shows. For solo shows, it's typically for rentals or through Flushing Town Hall, or when presenting Flushing Town Hall teaching artists and artists that Flushing Town Hall has a longer standing relationship with. With this gallery, not all galleries are built the same. Our space has its limitations. Unfortunately, when hanging pieces on the wall, there are weight limits. There's no drywall. It is completely plastered walls, so there is a weight limit to the pieces that we can hang on the space. And as you can see, since we do have other programs happening in the gallery from time to time, whether it be talks, information sessions, rentals, or performances, at this time, we're not able to hold sculptures or works on the floor and present them that way. We can really only hang flat works at this time. We're also working on other presentation spaces, including our hallway and our green room. And that's all to show that we have multiple spaces and we don't just show Flushing Town Hall programs. We also will show rentals if people want to rent our space. We provide artists with space grants so they can come into our space and work and create new work in Flushing Town Hall's building, as well as different partnerships we have with other organizations in the city that want to use our space. So that's all to give you an idea of how the kinds of programs that we work with in Flushing Town Hall. So for Ellen, I'd like to ask you to say some words about, with a space that's pretty customizable, it's a space that has its own limitations, how does that kind of affect the work that you do and when trying to book the space?
So as Dan was saying, one thing that makes Flushing Town Hall unique as a multidisciplinary presenter is the fact that we have a lot of flexibility within our building. We can pull out seats, we can move seats around, we can move our two Steinways to different parts of the building as well. So that makes our programming season really, really exciting, but it also makes it much more challenging. So for example, if we are pulling out a dance floor for a global mashup, that also automatically reduces the number of seats that we can sell. So that starts to affect ticket income. When we do programs for school kids, sometimes we'll literally not use the stage at all. We will put the performance right down on the floor. And we had a program a few years ago where we built a black box in our theater out of pipe and drape, and we only seated 125 people. So the complexity is great. The staff, we really love the fact that we can move things around and have all different types of programs in the building, but it also has other effects as well. It's not as simple as when you may approach a different venue or a different presenter or a different gallery where they may only have one kind of configuration. So that's one of the things you want to take into account. Sorry, Dan.
And that kind of brings us to the meat of the presentation, honestly, is that all venues are different, that each have their different limitations and different artistic and business goals. So before even reaching out to the venue, it's really important to do your research to identify which venues may be a good fit for presenting your work, or even a feasible fit for presenting your work. So when you're booking, Ellen, what do you as a venue consider, or what do you feel that venues will consider when trying to book either an exhibition or a performance?
So with my artistic director hat on, at Flushing Town Hall, we have a small curatorial team where we all have various interests and experience and expertise. So I could probably spend just an hour just going an hour on every one of the topics up on the slide, but in the interest of time and giving a broad overview, I'm going to be pretty brief. So there are many, many, many areas that a venue considers when booking a performance or an exhibition. And what I'm going to talk about is the fact that a venue will consider all of these topics, not just one or two. They're looking at a very, very broad overview with a lot of questions in mind as to whether or not you're going to get a booking. So the venue will consider its own mission and its own artistic identity. So for example, if you're an ensemble that performs early 17th century music, and you look at that venue's artistic programming and you see that all they present is rock music, it's highly unlikely that they're going to book you. So really understanding the mission of the venue, the artistic identity of the venue, that's something that I will take into account when I get a proposal from an artist, whether it's a performing artist or a visual artist. We're going to think about, who do we think is the target audience for this program? Is it an already existing audience, or are we going to have to build an audience, and how are we going to do that? We're also going to look at the marketability of the artists. Do you have viable press materials? Do you have great photos? Do you have great video? That's something that we're going to be talking about later on tonight, but also we're going to be doing a future presentation just on how to market yourself. The venues are also going to look at their booking cycle. So I'm going to take a look at what is already in the season. What have we booked 2 years ago? If your work is too similar to that particular work that's already in the pipeline, in the hopper, then you will likely get moved into the future. So upcoming program schedules is really, really important when a venue lays out its calendar. The venue is also going to think about financial considerations. So I mentioned earlier that one particular performance where we literally built a black box out of pipe and drape and put it on the floor so that the kids and families and school kids could have a really great experience. We had to spend a lot of time running the financial numbers. What was the financial implication of doing that? On the exhibition side, a few years ago, we hosted a major exhibit from the Smithsonian, which took up half of our gallery for a year. So it was a magnificent exhibition, but it definitely impacted our ability to rent the space. So other financial considerations that a venue will look at is, what's the budget? What is your program going to cost the venue? Is there any funding available for that particular program? If it's a performing arts project, then we're going to look at, what are our ticket projections? How much money do we think we can bring in at the box office for the show? We're going to look at sales projections. how many glasses of wine or bottles of beer do we think we can sell that night? If it's, again, a performance, if it's an exhibition that Flushing Town Hall is hosting, we always provide the opening reception for the exhibit itself. We're going to look at merchandise, we're going to look at artwork sales. That's all part of the financial consideration that is taken into account for every single possible booking. And then we're going to look at things like maximum occupancy and seating capacity. If we're pulling at a dance floor, if we make the theater look like a jazz club, if we have three-dimensional pieces that are hanging on the wall, that are wall-mounted, because as Dan mentioned, we're not putting three-dimensional work on the floor. We don't have gallery preparators on staff, so we don't want our maintenance staff, for example, moving works of art. So if it's a three-dimensional piece, it has to be wall-mounted. So then we need to take into account, okay, if we're going to put a concert or a rental in the gallery when we have three-dimensional pieces on the wall, we might have to reduce the seating capacity so that we have fewer chairs and fewer opportunities for somebody to trip or to bang into one another. A venue will also consider what are the tech needs of the exhibit or what are the tech needs of the performance. And again, that all gets added into the mix. And are there any other space limitations? We also look at artist reputation. How are you known in the field? So when I get an artist bio and let's say I see, oh, this artist has performed at Lincoln Center or this artist has exhibited at Queens Museum, I'm going to reach out to my colleagues to get some feedback. How was the audience reaction? How was the artist to work with? That's a really, really big thing. Where has the artist toured? Where has the artist exhibited in the past? Those are all things that tell the venue more about who you are than just seeing your work. It gives you a credibility and it gives you, it gives the venue a place to look when they're evaluating whether or not to book you into their space. And then I would say lastly, the quality of the marketing materials. If the marketing materials that you're sending the venue are crisp and clear and obviously professionally done, then that's going to bump you up in the possibility of getting booked likelihood than if your materials are really not up to par professionally, then you're going to end up really on the bottom of the pile. So all of those things that I mentioned are what venues consider when they are thinking about if they're going to book you.
So unfortunately, as much as we want it to be, it's not just, oh, the quality of the work, right, Ellen? It's all these different aspects.
That's right. So for example, if I'm looking at our season and I know we want to book, let's say an Irish band as an example, there are thousands of phenomenal Irish bands in New York City alone. So I might take a look at our season and say, okay, we already have one Irish band booked. Are we getting closer to St. Patrick's Day? Is there an Irish band that's reached out to us or that we're looking at that maybe has a particular take on Irish music, maybe from a particular part of Ireland? So not getting booked immediately does not mean lack of interest. It just might very well mean that the immediate fit is not there.
Thanks. And that's just all to say, with all those different parts that Ellen mentioned, and those aren't even all of the things that venues consider, that's the kind of frame of mind that I would suggest you guys look at when researching which venues to reach out to. So with those different points and different topics that venues will consider, reframe that and ask yourselves, what does the venue typically present? Does my work make sense there? Does the venue even have availability? Is the size of the space just flat out appropriate? Does that means, will your work fit and make sense there? Or are you hoping to bring in 100 people to your performance? If it's a smaller theater, unfortunately, that's not, that might not be a possibility for you. But also on the other side, if it's a really large theater, a really large gallery space, and the venue isn't confident that they'll be able to fill that space, that's another thing that they're going to consider. So all the way down from what are your tech and space needs? Venues might not be able to support the kind of project that you're trying to do. Keep those questions in the back of your mind before even sending anything out to these venues. And finally, with your artist touring and exhibition history, the quality of your marketing materials, that's all about providing the venue with the needed materials and information, which brings us to our next point, which is putting out your best foot forward. So you've done all the research, you've asked yourself these questions, you've considered what venues are thinking about when booking everything. Now you've highlighted a list of venues that might be a good fit for you. Ellen, in your opinion, what are you looking for? What are you expecting when an artist reaches out to you to potentially look at your space?
So there's absolutely a format to presenting to a venue. So in normal pre-COVID times, I probably get between 50 to 100 packages from visual artists and from performing artists pitching their shows. So I get huge stacks of materials. It's slowed down a little bit now because of COVID, since so many venues are currently closed. But the basic presentation pitch, whether it's to Flushing Town Hall or really to anyone, consists of something we learned a long time ago in school, or at least I learned a long time ago in school, and it was called the 5 W's. So it's who, what, when, where, and why. So who are you? What is it that you're pitching? Are you pitching an exhibition? Are you pitching a concert? Are you pitching a spoken word piece, a theater piece? What are you? When are you looking to do this? Presenters are often booking a year to two in advance because of different funding cycles. So if you say to a presenter, I'd like you to book me next month, the likelihood is that's not going to happen. If you even say, I'd like you to book me in the next 6 months, that may not happen either, depending on the venue. Some of the larger organizations like the Metropolitan Museum of Art or the Kennedy Center, they're booking 5 to 10 years down the road. So there's the when, and then there's the where. If you're looking at a venue and they have multiple spaces, are you pitching their gallery space? Are you pitching their garden space? Are you pitching their theater space? Maybe they have multiple theaters. And then the why. The why, I think, is one of the most important questions that you want to try to explain to the presenter, which is why should they pick you? What makes your program unique, different? What has it stand out from the crowd? What's the why factor? And so if you look at all of those 5 W's, they're really, really important. If you line them out, you could take a sheet of paper and write this down for yourself and pretend that you're talking to me or you're talking to a different curator and answer these 5 questions. It's a really important exercise. Then the other thing that the venue is going to want during a pitch is the artist's bio. If it's a group or an ensemble, a group exhibition, or a quartet or a sextet, you want to have a bio for every single person in the group, along with CVs, so that, again, we know who you are as individuals, who you are as a group. Then when you pitch to the venue, you need to have included, what's your artist fee? How much are you charging for this project? You may have different configurations. So sometimes an ensemble can say, well, we can send 10 musicians, but if you can't fit nor afford 10 musicians, we can send 5. So you want to try to think all of these questions out before you submit. But if I become interested in an artist and I go the step further and I want to know, well, how much would it cost to book you? And the answer is, I don't know, we haven't figured that out yet. Then it's likely that you're going to move to the bottom of the pile. The other pitch in the venue is the importance of your work samples and your marketing materials. And again, we're going to do a whole session just on that in a couple of weeks. But that's really, really, really critical, because that's, that expression that you eat food with your eyes first, right? When you when you have that kind of capability to be able to really view something on a plate of food, or you can smell it, it starts to affect all your senses, then you know that you're in for a yummy meal. It's the same thing with work samples and marketing materials. When you have crisp photos, when you have really, really strong audio that makes a lot of sense, then you're going to start to stand out from the crowd. So those are all really, really important things to make sure that you're included. Also, having a strong website is really, really important. Um, there are many artists, and I know that this is a challenge for emerging artists, but often artists don't have a website. So if I sit down with our marketing staff, like Dan, and say, this is an artist we want to book, one of the first questions they're going to ask me is, what kind of assets do they have? And if I say, well, they don't have a website, they don't have photos, they don't have audio, then it's going to be really hard for marketing to convince ticket buyers or audience members to come.
Thanks. And that's all to say, those work samples and marketing materials is your opportunity, like Ellen was mentioning, of standing out from the other artists that are reaching out to a potential curator or artistic director. So like Ellen mentioned, in a few months, we'll have a marketing session focused on best practices for work samples and marketing materials. But here's a quick overview of some tips that we thought we wanted to talk about with work samples and marketing materials. So this first work sample is a collage by Juan Hinojosa. It's titled Poof. And it's a collage of different paper cuttings. And this is all to show that high quality photos and compelling shots that tell the story of who you are as an artist is super important. Like Ellen said, you eat with your eyes first, and you know, with the visual arts especially, clear work samples is really important. You put in so much work into creating this piece. You want to take it all the way and take proper photos. So some great bits about Juan's collage is there's space around the work. Don't just crop it directly into the piece itself. You want to show some clean wall on the outside to give the piece some context. Make sure the works are properly lit. And I think the biggest thing, especially we're lucky in a time that most people have a smartphone, you don't need a professional camera necessarily to take a good photo of your work. This was done with a smartphone. That's all to say though, but lighting and spacing is crucial. The next work sample is a glass sculpture by Renee Radenberg. It's titled Extra Mundane, Ladder of Life. It's a fused glass with etching, 27 by 13 by 9. And on the left is the piece, is the glass piece in its entirety. And on the right is a detail of the base of the work. And that's just to show about three-dimensional work. It needs space and dimension. When you're taking and sending over work samples of sculptures, they don't necessarily always have to be head on. Like Renee has over here, it's a little bit diagonal. It gives a little bit more dimension, and you get a better sense of how much of the space that the sculpture takes. And if it makes sense for your work, like Renee did here, include detail shots. Make sure they have a purpose, though. Don't just add them to add them. Make sure they really do tell a story about the work, the piece itself, and then your work as a whole. And just to reiterate again, lighting is so important, especially with three-dimensional work. Renee uses a specific lighting setup in her studio. So if you are working with sculptural work, something that has a little bit more volume, always consider light and shadows when photographing your work, because that can really make or break a work sample.
And Dan, I just want to add, so you'll notice it's really terrific that that both artists included the dimensions of the pieces in their example, because that also helps the venue determine if your work will fit. So that word fit means a lot of things. Is it going to fit into the mission? Is it going to fit into the programming season? But also, in many cases, is the piece going to physically fit in the space? So for visual artists, make sure that you're always including the dimensions of the work. If there are weight considerations that may be taken into account, then make sure that you include that. The exhibition that we hosted for a year with the Smithsonian, the piece that we brought in was so heavy that we literally had to have engineers come in and evaluate whether or not that particular part of the gallery would be able to withstand the weight of that piece. So make sure that you include all of that information, and we'll be getting to performing artists in a moment, and then we'll talk about that as well.
And that's a great transition. For performing artists, it might seem kind of a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised. When sending audio or visual samples, be sure they're high quality. You know, no background noise or static. If possible, have it professionally mixed. And you want to, when giving a work sample, whether it's audio or video, you really want to have a sample that catches the attention of the presenter. When we were going over this, Ellen was mentioning kind of just lead with your money song, basically.
Yes. So a couple of years ago, I've given a bunch of presentations for performing artists in particular on showcasing at different booking conferences. There's a few of them around the country and actually around the world where presenters go to listen to artists with the possibility of booking them. And a colleague told me years ago, every money should be the money song. I'm sorry, every song should be the money song. So if you're putting your best foot forward to the presenter so they can try to book you, you want them to book you, make sure that every piece of music is phenomenal. I was told a while ago that it's almost like a seduction. You have 10 minutes, if that much, to try to get the presenter to pay attention to you. And often the venue will use and will need your marketing materials and your work samples for grants that they are writing. And if we're sending, for example, work samples to the National Endowment for the Arts, we're allowed to send samples that have to be very, very short because the panelists are reading hundreds and hundreds of applications. So if you have a sample that has a beautiful drum solo in the beginning or a really slow melodic intro, I would suggest actually not using that as a sample because the presenter, I know it may seem like a short time, but if the presenter isn't hooked within the first 20 seconds, then they're going to move on. And that's only, unfortunately, a function of time, not a function of interest. They can obviously always go back to it and listen more, but you really need to catch them right away.
And that's the same with, sorry.
Sorry, no, it's okay. Go ahead.
And that's the same with visual artists. You don't want to send just slides and slides of your work. Edit yourself, because a venue won't have all this time in the world to go over every single piece that you send. So you really want to make sure you make a really strong first impression through a few images or through a few songs, rather than sending everything that you have. If they're interested, they will look deeper into your catalog. So that brings us, sorry,
yeah,
Ellen,
no, it's okay. I was just going to say, again, in the performing arts world, when presenters go to some of these booking conferences and all these artists are showcasing, a presenter will literally poke his or head into a room and make a decision within 5 seconds whether or not they're going to stay. So the most important part of the pitch is really, whether you're a visual artist or a performing artist, it's really getting the presenter interested enough to move on to the next step and to keep you in mind. That's really crucial.
So we went over work samples. Next will be our marketing materials. On the left, you'll see, on the left is Han Bin, also known as Amadeus Leopold. He's an Asian musician holding up a violin upside down with glasses and in a tuxedo. And then on the right is Grace Kelly, another musician who is outside with sunglasses biting her saxophone. just showing kind of an energy and dynamism instantly through their headshots. On the other side, we also, this next slide, we have Slavic Soul Party. It's a group of musicians standing with their heads in a circle with their instruments on their chest. And then Betseda Machado y Poranda Clavo on the right, who is holding a maraca and standing with, Betseda is standing there with her band and members from her village in Venezuela. Do you want to say anything about marketing materials?
Sure, absolutely. So there's a type of photo that I know you've all seen that I refer to as four nice people sitting on a bench. And I get a lot of promotional materials that are literally artists or actually humans lined up sitting on a bench. Sometimes they're all smiling, sometimes they're all scowling. That kind of photo tells me absolutely nothing about the artist whatsoever, because they really could be anyone. So Dan, if you want to go back to Han Bin for a second. So sometimes when presenters are looking at their materials that they are going for an artist that they've already decided they're going to book, for example, they're going through all their photos, they're going through all their samples. You want to make sure you have both horizontal and vertical images, both black and white and color images. But sometimes an image is just going to pop right out at you. And the minute the staff saw this image of Han Bin amongst maybe 25 other artist images, we all said, that's the one, that one's going on our cover. And that image was compelling enough that we literally, this is the first time that this has ever happened, we had audiences calling us after they got our season brochure saying, we don't know who this guy is, but we want to come to the concert. So a really compelling image is going to give the venue something to work with you. The same thing with Grace Kelly. This is not your standard person standing very statically. You know, she's biting her saxophone. She looks like this cool, funky person. And all of her photos are like this. They're really, really, they're very spunky. They're very energetic. They're a lot of fun. And when a viewer looks at this image, they often think, wow, I don't know who this is, but I'm going to come. And then if we scroll to the next shot, the group shot. So again, Slavic Soul Party, they could very easily have all stood up holding their instruments. Instead, they all moved around in a circular fashion. And one thing I just realized we did not do is we literally used the circular image in the inside of our season brochure, because our tagline is global arts for a global community. And whenever we have that in a printed material, we have a circular design with those words, global arts for a global community. So using, like, Slavic Soul Party handed us this image that was completely perfect. And with Betseda, you learn a little bit more about her. You learn that that she has a maraca. You can see her personality shines through. You're not really sure who the people in the background are, but you can tell that it's not a corporate setting, that it's a very friendly, community-based setting. Some of the other people in the image are holding instruments. So these are all materials that tell the presenter something about you before they've even opened up any language or any text that you've sent, and right away they know something about you. So these are really thoughtfully conceived images on all these four artists' part.
And it's always, in the end, it always is about making that strong first impression. And as Ellen said, and we've mentioned, these are just really general tips about work samples and marketing materials. We will be having another session later this year about marketing best practices, that we will really do a deep dive into what we should look into for when presenting your work. So ideally, you've done your research, you've formed a really strong pitch that makes a really good impression. What next? Basically, it's in the end, it's making the best impressions on presenters is important, even if right away they're not booking you or scheduling or presenting your work right away. Regardless of the response, it's really important to maintain that good relationship with venues and keep giving on a good impression. So ideally, a venue is interested and they want to present to you. After you've selected someone to present at Flushing Town Hall, whether it's at the gallery or the theater, what are you looking for? What makes an artist easy to work with? Because as we mentioned, you know, an artist's reputation matters, right, Ellen? So.
Absolutely. I think one of the most important things is to respond in a prompt and timely manner. So if the venue has reached out to you, and again, this presentation is predominantly for self-represented artists, not artists who have an agent or a manager. But if a venue's reached out to you and they want to know more, then it's really important to respond in a timely manner. And timely means on the presenter's timeliness, not necessarily, you've all heard ASAP, ASAP, as soon as possible. My as soon as possible and your as soon as possible may not be the same thing. So if a venue reaches out to you and says, we're interested, we'd like more information, here's what we'd like to see from you, it's really important that you respond right away. And if for some reason you can't, just let the presenter know what's going on with you. Because again, there's a lot of magnificent artists out there and the presenter has to move quickly. And sometimes the presenter is working on a grant proposal and they want to wrap your materials. They want to wrap more information into the grant proposal. And they can't do it unless they have more than just your pitch. They're going to need more information. If the venue has sent you a contract, please sign it right away. Don't make them wait because again, it's tied into the cash flow for the organization, financial considerations, getting that accounts payable on the book. So there's a lot of issues that the presenter and his or her staff has to deal with on their side. So if there's a contract, please sign it right away. Be clear what you expect from a venue. So I mentioned earlier that if we're hosting an exhibition, Flushing Town Hall will pay for the opening reception. But you might say, well, we the artists, will bring the wine, but then we expect the venue to bring the food. So just make sure that it's clear what the expectations are. If you want a gold-plated piano for your presentation, make sure that you've included that in your tech rider so that everyone knows what the expectations are. Providing those strong marketing assets that we've talked a lot about, and also helping with social media promotion. So many venues, especially smaller ones, they have a tiny, tiny marketing and promotional staff. So if you can share information and posts on your Facebook page or Instagram, if you can do e-blasts to your own fan base, be available for media interviews, help to work with the venue to say, hey, I think this is a good target audience, or I have connections with this particular audience. I'm going to help you along to market the exhibit or to market the show. That's hugely helpful. That working reputation, as Dan was saying, is really important because presenters talk. Like everybody on the planet talks, right? But presenters in this field, we all talk to one another. So we know who was ready to tour, who had what the venue needed, who had interesting ideas, and who was responsive to requests by staff.
Yeah, in the end, you don't want to get a reputation as a difficult artist to work with, unfortunately, because then that will kind of contribute to the decision whether or not a venue wants to work with you. And I guess to kind of end this, what happens on the other end? Unfortunately, I send you my pitch and maybe it's not the right time or it's not something that you can do right now. Like, what should I do as an artist that's still hoping to present and exhibit at your space?
So I know that can feel really hard. That can feel like a rejection. Oh, I sent my package. Nobody got back to me. I didn't hear from anyone. it literally can take a presenter months and months and months to get to your materials. So I think the most important thing I would say is don't give up. If you think about your craft, if you think about your art form, you're all artists because you didn't give up. You didn't give up when the piece of work on the canvas or in the studio just wasn't coming. You didn't give up in your training as artists, in your training as whether you're a visual artist, a performing artist, a spoken word artist. So you can't give up here. You have to be really confident in your work. And I know that can be really hard sometimes, especially now. Like it's much easier to be down on everything, but artists are so needed in the world. So even if you don't get booked right away, again, right now for Flushing Town Hall, and the whole landscape has changed because of COVID, we're looking at 2021 in the fall to spring 2022. And for us, because we also rent the gallery and the garden and the theater, we also have rentals in between our own presenting season. So we're not booking, say, for December. So if you've sent me a packet or you've sent another presenter a packet with a really short time frame, it's unlikely they're going to be able to fit you in. So I guess the first thing I would again say is don't despair. Be patient. You have to be in it for the long haul. And you're all artists, which is you're in it for the long haul anyway. Get to know the presenter. Get to look at their season. Go to their programs. Go to their opening receptions. Introduce yourself to the presenter. If you have upcoming concerts or presentations or exhibitions, make sure you send them an invitation. Sometimes they'll be able to come and sometimes they won't, but the fact is you will have invited them. And that's really, really important because again, that's the way that you start to stand out from the crowd. Make sure if there's any updates that you keep the presenter informed. I have new band members, or I'm now working on a project that's now a group project, or I used to work in collage, now I work in mixed media, three-dimensional work. So just make sure that you're always letting the presenter know what's up with you. And if you have any exciting news, you have great sales, you're on a tour, you have a new album, you have a new exhibition, make sure you just keep the presenter informed because that's really, really important. But I think, again, the most important thing is don't despair and be patient.
And in the end, you do just keep in touch. It's a process, and something that I didn't learn until later on is that, things are getting booked years in advance. So it's not necessarily a remark on the quality of your work. It's just, timing is kind of everything, right? So, well, thanks, Ellen. Thanks for kind of taking part in this conversation. I think we can dive right into into the Q&A. Like I mentioned, guys, if you have any questions, please send them through the Q&A button, and then we'll have them. If you have any questions before we dive into the next section, feel free to email us. Ellen is at ekodadek@flushingtownhall.org. And then myself, I am D Bamba at flushingtownhall.org. And again, you can learn about all our other programs and our upcoming, as well as our upcoming professional development conversations on our website at flushingtownhall.org as well.
And Dan,
so,
Dan, I'm sorry, before we go to the Q&A, I just want to mention, in case anyone has to drop off, that there is a borough-wide festival being planned for June 2022. It's called Queens Rising. And it's going to be as I mentioned, borough-wide for arts organizations and for individual artists to participate. This morning was the first information session, but there's another one tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Everyone is welcome to join. You can be an external organization or an artist who does not live in Queens, but your project has to take place in Queens. And so if anyone is interested in getting the link for the info session that's at 4 o'clock tomorrow, just email me and I'll send it to you because it is a closed group just like this one is. Thanks.
And this is for all disciplines?
It's for all disciplines.
So visual and performing arts?
Visual and performing arts, spoken word, puppetry, etc.
Great. And again, it'll be for Queens-based artists, or if you're not Queens-based.
Yeah, and Dan, I see in the chat it says Queens Rising 2020. It's actually Queens Rising 2022.
Sorry about that.
That's all right, which is hard to imagine that we're looking at 2022, but it will be here before we all know it.
Great. You had touched on it before about considering the booking schedule in the time of COVID.
Yes.
Has there been other kind of changes from Flushing Town Hall's perspective about considerations when booking for during the pandemic, unfortunately?
Absolutely, and I would say not only for Flushing Town Hall, but for all arts presenters, whether you're an exhibition space or a performing arts space. But I'll just use Flushing Town Hall as a model. So we canceled, actually we started canceling programs a month prior to everyone else because of the nature of our neighborhood. We are operating out of a predominantly Asian neighborhood, so the community was very plugged into what was happening in Wuhan and overseas much earlier than everybody else. So, so we canceled programs from February to June. And our first commitment is we want to rebook all those artists and all those exhibitions that we canceled. We think that that's the most moral thing to do, but that also then starts to shift the calendar. And thankfully, many of the funders, such as the New York State Council on the Arts, the National Endowment for the Arts, Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation, they are allowing the organizations that they have provided partial funding for to program until 2022 in some cases. So the entire booking calendar has shifted completely for everybody. And the best thing to do if you're reaching out to other presenters, other venues, is you want to find out what's happening in terms of their individual booking cycles now that the pandemic has shifted everything. For Flushing Town Hall, we are not allowed to reopen. You may have read that museums and cultural institutions in the city of New York have reopened at a much reduced capacity. That does not include organizations that present performing arts. So we don't actually know at this minute when we will be able to be back in our building, either for an exhibit or for a performance. So right now we're doing programming online, which again has totally shifted our calendar and totally shifted everything that we're thinking about. So just check in with the venue and they can be more specific with you in terms of how are they managing and what kind of status do they have in the pandemic. It's going to be different for everybody.
Thanks. A question that was asked was, say as an artist, I want to present at one of the bigger spaces, whether it's one of the bigger museums in the city or one of the concert halls. How do I, as an emerging artist, what's the best way to reach out to a space like MoMA or Carnegie Hall or the Guggenheim? Do you think that I can, as someone who might be, in a certain level of my career, like when's the right time, do you think, to kind of reach out to the bigger
So
spaces?
I think you definitely need to have a body of work if you're going to reach out to the Guggenheim or to the Met or to MoMA or to Lincoln Center or the Kennedy Center. You're going to need a body of work. You're going to need that bio. You're going to need that performance or exhibition history. You're going to really need to pitch who you are. The bigger exhibition spaces, the bigger museums, they tend to work thematically. So they will have an exhibition around a particular theme, for example. If you don't fit into that theme, then they're not going to consider you. So you kind of, again, you need to get on their radar, and that takes a long time. So you have to be in it for the long haul. So just make sure that you're gathering all those marketing materials. I know it can be kind of annoying, or you may sort of roll your eyes and go, oh, I don't really feel like doing that. But it's going to make all the difference, especially if you're an emerging artist. You want to show the venue that you're professional, you're committed, you have what you think they need, you fit into their theme, you fit into all their criteria, and you just have to be persistent. And I would say too that getting to know the presenter is really, really critical. Some of what we talked about: invite them to your gallery openings, invite them to your concerts, um, keep them apprised of what you and your ensemble, or you as an individual artist or a collective, let them know what you're doing all the time, and you will slowly start to rise in their, not only in their estimation, but then they'll remember you. When you come along, they'll remember you if they're working on something that's thematic. They go, oh yeah, I heard from this artist 2 years ago, and now their work absolutely fits into what we're doing.
And that was a question also, and I think that can kind of be extended to this next question about establishing a network of whether it be collectors or fans. I think, to Ellen's point, it doesn't happen overnight. You do have to grind at it and show up to different openings or performances or conferences or whatever it might be, and also do those little things. Like if you're part of a group show, that's great. Make sure that you have views of your work in that show. Make sure that any marketing materials that were done, whether it's a exhibition catalog or just a flyer and it has your name on it, make sure you just keep a scan and a hard copy of it for your records, just to create that kind of history, that artistic history and repertory, so you can make those connections, have your materials ready when trying to pitch for a bigger organization or venue. And when establishing a network, I really do believe that it is just meeting people and talking to them and just staying on their radar. Like we were talking about, following up. Maintain a decent email list, or whether it's your following is on social media, have it be regularly updated so people can know what you're working on. Just so they know that you're active, but also that you have a good body of work and you are still working, and hopefully be able to sell to them or show there at some point. But
I think too, you want to, when establishing a network, you want to cast, I think you want to cast that establishing a network widely. You never know who you're going to meet that knows someone that might be able to support your work. You never know. I mean, Flushing Town Hall has hosted a weekly artist Zoom call. You're all invited to participate. It's every Friday at 5 o'clock. Email me and I'll send you the link. And through that weekly Zoom call, we've established a really lovely group of people that are now a network for one another, that are supporting one another's work, that are sending out information. Oh, so-and-so has an exhibition coming up, please participate. So you never know who can help you. So that's definitely part of establishing a network, is constantly, it's like when you throw a stone into a pod and into a pond and it sort of ripples out. It's the same thing with a network. You meet 2 people, then you meet another 2 people, then you meet 4 people. Let them know, let everybody know what you're up to and what you're doing.
So it is after 8 right now. There are 2 more questions, and if you don't mind, they're kind of Flushing Town Hall specific, and then we can kind of finish the talk.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I'm sorry, Dan, to interrupt you. I just want to say one more thing. What to do if the venue is not responsive. So let's say the venue has booked you, the venue has expressed interest, and you sent out your material to the venue, and then you just never hear from them again. Then what do you do? My position is you keep reminding them. So on the presenter side, presenters are crazy, crazy, crazy busy. And I know for myself, I walk into my office, which is now my dining room table. Um, I've been working from home since March, as have all of my colleagues and all of you. So I'm surrounded by paper. I come into my office, my dining room table every day with a plan, and then within 5 minutes, my plan is shot. So if you don't hear back from a venue and you sent them your signed contract, you haven't gotten the countersigned contract back. You sent them your materials because they asked you for it and you didn't hear from them. Just make sure that you keep following up with them. Don't just say, well, they didn't get back to me. I guess they don't really care. Just, if you can flip that narrative and say, they are interested, they just haven't had the time. And just feel free to be persistent and say, hey, I sent you my exhibition materials. I didn't hear back from you. What's up with that? In a nice way. But feel free to do that because it's also a really good reminder in the midst of a very, very, very busy, crazy time.
It's all about being responsive without being pushy, right? That's the fine line that we have to kind of flirt with. But yeah, so that all being said, thank you, Ellen, for taking the time to speak with everyone, and
Sure.
thank you to everybody who's tuned in. Um, I hope this was helpful. As I mentioned, if you have any other questions after this session, please feel free to email myself or Ellen, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And then also on top of that, our next session is going to be next month, Wednesday, October 28th, fundraising for individual artists 101 with Jessica Pena, our Director of Development, and Jay House, our Grants Manager here at Flushing Town Hall. And then we'll also have other topics every month as well, so keep an eye out for that. And just one last kind of favored to ask of you guys. Tomorrow we'll be sending you a survey about the program and what you thought. If you could take just 2 minutes to just let us know what you thought about it. And we'll also be following up with slides and notes from the presentation. And down the road, the presentation will be available on YouTube. So thanks again for joining. I'm Dan. On behalf of Ellen, I want to thank you guys for joining us, and please keep in touch. Keep in touch with us. Send us any questions that you have, and visit our website for all the different online programs that we're going to be doing. So, thanks again, and yeah, sorry, Ellen.
Yeah, Dan, I was just going to say, if anyone wants to stay on the call for another minute or two, we can answer the 2 questions that are specific to Flushing Town Hall. If anybody, wants to do that, I see that we still have a lot of people on the call, so I can answer those really quickly if you want, or I can respond in a different way.
Well, the first question, if I was going to email those over, but yeah.
Oh, just so everyone knows the answer.
Yeah, the first question is work insured while exhibited at Flushing Town Hall?
Yes, the work is insured while exhibited at Flushing Town Hall. We have a blanket gallery for everything that happens within our physical space.
And what kind of audience do we usually get?
So it really depends on the program. If it's a group exhibition, then we will get other visual artists who come, friends and family of the artists. If it's a performance, then again, it varies dramatically. Even though our name is Flushing Town Hall, we get audiences who come from all over the New York City metropolitan area, New Jersey, Long Island. We've had school groups come from Connecticut. So it varies very, very much depending on what the program is. And again, that's a conversation that we have with the artists when we're considering booking them, is who do they think is the audience that we're going to get for their program. So I'll leave it there.
Well, thank you, Ellen, and thanks again to everyone joining. And yeah. So let me stop sharing, and we'll see you guys hopefully next month for October 28th for fundraising for individual artists, or for some of our many streams and programs that we'll be doing throughout the month. So thanks everyone, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Great. Thank you, everybody.